Hello and welcome into the Fog.net podcast. My name is Michael Swain, the Kansas beat writer for 24/7 Sports, coming to you from a hotel room in Frisco, Texas. I almost said Arlington right there, and that would have been bad because I am not in Arlington. Typically, Big 12 Media Days has been in Arlington in years past. Not this year. I was in Vegas last year. We're back in Texas. Who knows where it's going to be next year? Maybe they'll send us international. Maybe we'll be somewhere in a different country next year. But for this time, Big 12 Media Days is in Frisco, Texas. Spent the better part of today talking to Lance Leipold. Travis Goff was here. DJ Withers, Dean Miller, Jaylen Daniels, and Deshaun Hanukkah. Plenty of stuff we can dive into today. I don't think this is going to be a super long podcast. Look, there is stuff to talk about right now, but there's also not a lot of stuff to talk about right now because so much of this season, and I think the interesting parts of this season are going to be determined by what happens in training camp. And as things stand right now, as we sit here recording this on July 9th, we are 14 days away from when KU players report to start training camp. So we're really counting down the days. Week 0 does make for an earlier start for KU. They start 1 week earlier. It also means they're going to have an extra bye week during the year. It's going to be a bit more of a longer grind this season, but we're not far away from it. And so I think there's a couple things we can talk about today, though it's definitely, I think, a different atmosphere. Just being around KU today compared to last year and even the year before that, this felt like a little bit more of a 2022 or 2023 vibe, just in terms of, I think, the attention that was on KU. Not as many national reporters around the KU table. As the players and Leipold were there to talk, overall a different feeling than one last year specifically, where man, everyone and their mom wanted to get some time with KU and talk about what was then a very anticipated season. And I think this season is highly anticipated, myself at least, for a few reasons. There's a lot of newness here. And I think for the first time with KU, we're seeing a team that was built by Leipold's coaching staff. Because over the last few years, it's been about player development and player retention. Well, this offseason, KU goes out and gets 20 transfer portal players. Over a dozen are going to probably be in contention to start or at least have a good role on the two deep. And so there's a lot to be interested in with this season, but that stuff hasn't been decided yet. It's a very different sort of Big 12 Media Days than it was last year, where you're talking about guys who knew they were going to start, right? Devin Neal was here, Mello Dotson was here, Jaylen Daniels was here, and Cornell Wheeler was here, and you knew those guys were going to start. And obviously, everyone knows Dean Miller, DJ, like those guys are going to start. But you look broadly across the team right now, man, like offensive line, super interesting position. I'll talk about them in a little bit with some news that came out today. Defensive line is going to be a strength of the defense, but then you look right behind it, a linebacker, you don't know who's going to play. You don't know who's going to be starting at necessarily at cornerback, and safety is going to be interesting to see how the depth pans out. So, like, look, this is all stuff we're going to get to during camp, especially if you're a VIP subscriber. Like, we're going to cover all this stuff. But right now, as talking season gets underway, I think a lot of the focus is on the big picture. And some big picture news for KU coming out today is that Bryce Foster will miss the start of training camp. He had a minor cleanup surgery to repair an injury that took place recently. It was not, at least we were told that it's not from something that happened during like track and field season or spring football. It's a recent injury. And so he will miss most likely the first week, 2 weeks of training camp. But Lance Leipold said that he expects Bryce will be ready to go for this season opener on August 23rd. What does that mean? Well, look, you know, when you're developing a new offensive line that's going to have a new left guard, a new right tackle, right, and just new to the program, period, at those positions, most likely, or you're going to have someone like Calvin Clements, who, albeit incredibly talented and someone that has an incredibly bright future, he still has not started a full season of college football yet. And so he does not have that same game experience as a Bryce Cable do, right? Or as a Kobe Baines at right guard. And so now during camp, right, KU's going to be going through with, most likely Tyler Mercer and Amir Herring taking the snaps. And it's just going to be a different dynamic as KU tries to figure out who's going to start at left guard, who's going to start at right tackle, and you try and get that unit to gel. Now, look, maybe we're overblowing this. KU flipped their tackles a week into training camp last year, and it worked out okay. So it's a situation that obviously is not ideal. You'd love to have your best player, arguably, available for training camp from day one, but he's not. And so obviously it's not ideal, but I also am not smashing the panic button right now. This is a situation where if we get to game week and it's not, super positive, or if during training camp we don't see Bryce take the field for a practice, you know, then maybe I'll be a little more panicked than I am right now. So offensive line, super interesting position though to track. And Lance Leipold talked a little bit about that today, off to the side with the few of us that were here. And he talked about kind of how that first bye week coming out of the Missouri game, he feels like the depth for KU is going to look really good at that point in time. And as I mentioned, there's going to be some position battles to watch during training camp along the offensive line. So that's the first kind of bit of real news from today. Obviously, the other one is Jaylen Daniels. It's been kind of now a habit, that Jaylen has been banged up during spring, so he doesn't talk. That's KU's policy. And Big 12 Media Days is the first time he's been able to talk. And it was the same situation last year. It's the same situation this year. And so we got the chance to talk to Jaylen for the better part of 20 something minutes, over the course of a couple different interview sessions. Um, for him, we can talk about the beginning first. So the season ends and Jaylen tells KU that he is going to come back. And that happens before Jeff Grimes leaves to go to Wisconsin. Now, obviously, on the night of all this news breaking, like Grimes, um, it comes out that he's trending towards Wisconsin. And then, like 3 hours later, Jaylen announces he's coming back. According to Leipold, Jaylen alerted KU that he planned on going back to KU. It was going to be KU or NFL. And he alerted KU he wanted to go back. And then when the stuff with Grimes happens, Leipold calls Jaylen, tells him what's going on, tells him, hey, Jim Zbrowski is going to be your offensive coordinator next year. That's where we're going to go with this move. So it starts there. And then Jaylen decides to have the knee cleanup. Obviously misses spring, and then it's been an interesting couple weeks for Daniels this summer. He went to the Manning Passing Academy where he was able to go spend some time around, obviously, Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, but also around some other guys in the college football quarterback landscape, and got to go spend some time and pick their brains and kind of just talk ball. And then last week, Jaylen went to, obviously he's from LA, and so he went back to Southern California, and there he was joined by KU's wide receivers. So I think out of the entire wide receiver room, I think almost all of them were there outside of a couple freshmen who didn't make the trip. But it was a chance for those guys to go out and all spend time together. And I think that's really important. And even, Jaylen spoke to the importance of it, having the ability to go and develop chemistry because Jaylen didn't do spring practice. And so he missed the chance to throw hundreds of footballs to Emmanuel Henderson, Levi Wentz, Cam Pickett, right? Newcomers to the team. And this opportunity gave them the chance to all go out together and train for 2 days, but then also to bond and get to know each other. And I thought Jaylen made an interesting point how when it comes time for camp and he's going to get on guys when the timing isn't right or when things need to be perfect and maybe it's not. He said he's going to get on guys and he wants to make sure that they understand that he cares about them as people outside of just football players and so that they have a personal relationship. And so you get all those guys out in LA, they go work out 2 days and then they spend a couple other days just kind of hanging out together, bonding, spending time. So I thought that was very interesting. And obviously you contrast that to last off season, and it's very funny when you get details about, a year ago, and it all makes a lot more sense. Now, obviously, we knew about, LJ Arnold getting hurt last spring practice, first spring, missed entire part of spring. I missed that he stepped on some catfish barb. If someone knows what that is, please correct me if I'm not describing this right, but he stepped on it. And basically it knocked him out for a first couple of the fall camp practices. And so by the time the middle of camp came around, Quentin Skinner finally was healthy after he missed basically July through the first half of camp. LJ Arnold was healthy, and then Luke Grimm was healthy. And so it wasn't until, 2 weeks before the season starts that Jaylen was throwing to the wide receivers. And so you're like, yeah, it makes sense why early in the season things did not look crisp. And so now this year, it seems like, Jaylen at least is taking it upon himself. And he even credited Emmanuel Henderson with the idea, partially, of having all of the wide receivers out because Emmanuel was out with Jaylen earlier in the summer to work out and just spend time one on one. He had the idea of bringing everyone back. So just an interesting dynamic going into training camp. And we'll obviously see if that ends up paying dividends or if it was something that in hindsight is just kind of a meh type of thing. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. So that's a Jaylen Daniels story. What else on offense? Daniel Highshaw continues to get positive praise. He and Le'Shawn Williams will probably be KU's 1-2 punch. Leipold brought up Highshaw, his story, right? 2022, you'll remember. I mean, he was playing great football. The Duke game obviously is one that whenever this season comes to an end, regardless of what happens, one of Daniel Highshaw's best moments as a Jayhawk will be that catch in the run against Duke. And he was playing at such a high level that year before he dislocated his hip again. And now you look at him, it's been a couple years, but he's in great shape. He really looks poised to have a big senior year, and he's waited his time. So he got some positive praise. I talked to Deshaun Hanika off to the side for a little bit. He's got a really cool story I'll tell at some point before the season. Obviously Topeka kid, but for him to go through what he went through, tearing his Achilles in the spring of 2024, coming back and now getting the chance to be the starting tight end at Kansas, right? He grew up in Topeka. He's a KU fan through and through. And to be able to be one of the leaders of the team as they break in a new stadium, I think it's pretty cool. And so he's got some other stuff hobby wise that he got into while he was sidelined, and was able to pursue a little bit more that I'll dive into more at a later time. Defensively, look, there's a lot that's going to be decided in camp. Like I mentioned, linebacker, KU added some really talented players. We'll have to see how that room pans out. Same thing at cornerback and safety. I think for me, you look at the defense and I think it's going to be more athletic. But again, it's going to be how do the pieces come together? And then talking to Dean Miller about his offseason, he is really striving to really build on what he did last year. I think for him, his big focus is trying to be, um, uh, he said, more than a sack a game, which obviously is very high expectations for yourself. But that's the mindset he's going in with. So, look, those are just some of the things that I think stood out on a day like this. We talked to Travis Goff as well. I think Jack wrote a story about the latest update. Everything right now indicates KU will be ready for the season opener on August 23rd. The conference center will not be ready until October, but that's been known for a while now. Now all eyes turn to phase two. And man, if what Travis Goff is floating as what's coming ends up coming to fruition and it ends up being as big as Goff says, it sounds like KU is going to get a very, very large capital donation and something that's very big. And Goff described it as a one of one in college athletics. So what does that mean? You know, I don't know. I tried to pry and see if we could get some info, but no. That'll be something that they will release in due time. But man, you could sense the excitement from Goff as it pertains to that. So, look, those are just some of the things. I've got a full notebook with a little bit more intel on some players that you can read on fog.net if you're a VIP subscriber. Obviously, hey, if you're not a subscriber, now's the time to get on board, right? Fall camp's coming. It's going to be busy. And look, nowadays with the calendar, we're going to blink and it's going to be next season already, or next summer, I should say. So look, there's plenty. Like you look at the fall, we got fall camp, then the season starts. You got basketball recruiting that takes off in the fall with visits. Then you get in the transfer portal season in the winter, and then it's basketball season, it's basketball transfer portal season, and then you blink, and then it's July 9th, 2026, and we're here in a hotel room doing another podcast. So look, it's busy times, but there's no better time to sign up for VIP. So definitely keep an eye out too. We may have a sale coming up at the start of camp. So definitely keep an eye out for that one. But hey, thanks as always for listening. Hopefully this was somewhat insightful, and not just me rambling. But as always, thanks for listening to the podcast. We'll have a lot more coming. Obviously, we'll do more podcasts with Kevin as the season unfolds. We got maybe some basketball stuff we'll do more of as things start to ramp up. But hey, thanks as always for listening. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, thanks a bunch. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on your podcast platform of choice, please leave a rating and review. That gets us a lot of help as we try and reach more people to talk Kansas athletics. So thanks always for watching. We'll talk to you all again soon.